This is an Arc Analysis.
This is Arc Analysis.
Arc
I'm
Analysis.
still gonna leave everything in from the original. I don't care.
Mr. Miracle, 2017, published by DC Comics, written by Tom King and drawn by Mitch Gerads.
He had one job: say written properly. I can't say it, so there goes that.
You know how many times you've said you have one job,
and you can't do that one job.
I wish I could go back and see it because there's been at least like 12 times you're like, you had one job.
Listen, we hired Stat Boy to do all of these supercuts that we thought were going to be hilarious. Remember Stat Boy? Man. And they never came back with all the cuts that they were supposed to do. They're supposed to get all the times I could not pronounce actor's name correctly, and there's a lot.
Yeah, every
time you've chewed.
Every time we do a show,
you chewed on the mic.
Yeah, the old days.
He's like, I'm hungry. Yeah, I'm hungry. Like, there's no separation of church and stage. It's like, I'm eating now. Push record.
Just ridiculous.
The dog days. Thanks for sticking with us. There's like 4 of you guys out there that Miracle, but we haven't talked in a while. So
yeah, this one flew on my radar for a bit. I remember I read the first few issues when it first came out because they looked familiar to me when I was reading them back again. I was like, I remember this. Probably the first 4 or 5, but I obviously didn't finish the run. This was like I thought like this is a 12-issue miniseries, and I thought it was going to be like a 5 or 6 issue. That's why I threw it on here because this is the longest. Like 12 issues isn't really a lot, but it's the longest arc analysis we've done. I think
this is basically an Aventus.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I was like, we could make this into an actual episode, but we're not going to. We're just going to keep it
Here are the blueprints that we don't use.
Yeah, well, because it was all those last minute changes. Like, no, we're dropping an AA this week, so this was going to be. So, Mr. Miracle,
we could talk about this for an hour if you really want to.
That's why I said it could be an episode or it could be super short. This was. What did you think of this?
It's such an interesting read. It should make sense, and a lot of times it doesn't because you're playing catch up, especially if you don't have the background to the main characters being Big Bertha, which is awesome to see.
Big Barda.
My mistake. I'm calling Bertha. It's gonna happen.
That's gonna happen again.
It's gonna happen. And Miracle. So if you're not familiar with these characters, just to get dropped into their world, you're like, huh? And there's a lot going on, but once you kind of figure out their rhythm and how they play off of each other, it's. I was saying earlier, it's kind of like a romantic comedy. It's like a tongue in cheek. It's kind of like a meet cute. Yeah. Like they have all these like touch tones of like, oh, there's a real relationship here. Like forget all the comic book stuff that plays second tier to, like I'm trying to live with this person. This person's trying to live with me. This is our day to day. It just happens that we have mother box technology, and there's always a boom tube, and someone's always like flashing in to be like, now you have to come fight an apocalypse, and you're like, all right, cool. But weird.
Yeah, and it's very strange. This is very strange and very unique. You said there's a romantic comedy, but at the same time, it opens up with a suicide attempt. So,
I mean, it gets there.
It does get there. Yeah, no, it definitely does that. Like, it's 12 issues, but you could classify the first 6 as kind of one book and the second 6 as a second book because the focus shifts quite a bit between the two. It starts out with Scott Free, Mr. Miracle. It's cool they give you the backstory at the beginning. I knew that, and so if someone is reading Mr. Miracle, they'll probably know the whole history of him and Orion getting swapped at birth to make peace between.
Which is a dark story in itself. Like that's its own craziness, and then the fact that Scott Free ends up becoming Mr. Miracle, like that whole storyline is its own.
He takes
over the mantle, and like how that happens is crazy, and the way he got the job is kind of. He was raised by Granny Goodness, which is awesome. So like that popped me real easily because I was like, oh, Granny Goodness. And his story of when he was a kid, like he was always trying to escape kind of her
hold on him,
like sadistic and always torturing them, and keeps finding ways to remove himself from these impossible traps, which turns out to be a prerequisite for who Mr. Miracle is, which is, I guess, an illusionist, like a magician, escape artist.
Yeah.
So it's a weird kind of parallel that he ends up finding, and then because him and Barda are both from Apocalypse and were both kind of raised by Granny Goodness, or at least in under their clutches, they find each other
Yeah,
on Earth, and like their love story begins. So it's a weird, meet cute story, but it works.
it's interesting how we learned that they were raised differently by her too. Either that or Scott, because you learn that Scott's mind isn't always what it seems. So it's things that he goes through or things that he talks about is like the whole book. You're like, is that true? Did that actually happen, or is it did it not happen? Because they talk about Granny Goodness in different lights. Where
Hmm.
he's like, oh yeah, she was actually good to me. She told me she loved me. Did she ever tell you she loved you? And Big Brother's
No,
like, no, never did that. Like, what are you talking about? So either she had different methods with the two of them, which is believable, or he's just completely like out of it, which is also
right?
believable because he's going through some serious PTSD and mental illness in this book, and it's the way that King presents it is really really
Yeah,
interesting to me.
it's fascinating, and we were talking about just the artwork and how the 9 panels. Like this is the most interesting basic page you're going to see. It's just 9 panels every time, but the way that they manage to squeeze emotion and dynamic moves, and just you can see when things are slipping because everything will be it'll be like a normal panel, and then the lines will just blur a little bit, or the color will change, or like it seems like you're
Like a
yeah, you're
glitch.
adjusting the TV screen, and you're just like, wait, what's going on here? And then you just see Dark Seed is period, right?
Yeah,
It's not a mind fuck, but it's definitely like you get trapped in the story.
yeah, yes. And because they use the nine Tom King's famous 9 panel, like it's
Right,
classic, but that's what he's known
right.
for is the 9 panel. He can pack in a lot of story into one page and one issue. So you're asking me like before we started, like, do you have a favorite issue? I was like, I really don't remember them because I read them all at
Right.
once, and there's so many. When you read one issue, almost feels like you're reading two or
Yeah.
three because it's all packed in there so many times. And I think they only break that mold like 6 times,
Not a lot.
five or
In
six,
in the
five or six
beginning and
times
the
they have
end,
that
where
one.
like they give
Yeah,
you a full page or something.
yeah, and that makes it pop even
Right.
more because like you're not used to that. Because what he'll do with those 9 pages too, those 9 panels as well, is sometimes they'll do a picture that goes across or an animation that goes across all three, or an animation that takes up all nine,
Yeah.
but there's still the 9 panels, and it kind of gives it like that locked in look or like a cagey look almost. And it's really fascinating the way they do it because it's like it never gets confusing
No.
because the visuals can be confusing, but where to read never gets
No.
confusing because it's just top. Because sometimes panels can be like, "Oh, where do I go next?"
Right.
Sometimes, right? It's like, do I go down or no? It's this one's just like across, across, across. So it's very fluid in that sense, and it makes for a really engaging story, especially when, like you were saying, the panels will go all weird,
Right.
especially and then when he's under like a lot of duress, the dark side is thing
Yeah.
comes up. And it comes up more and more the more stressed out he is. And it's like, what is going
And
on?
they do amazing work with just inverted colors. Like it'll be like a normal palette, and then you'll see it flip, or they'll go to apocalypse, and everybody's color scheme changes because of like the light of whatever the moon of that planet is. Like you were saying, the 9 panels isn't even boring. Like there's certain scenes like when they're sneaking into apocalypse, and like they're just talking about like they're having a everyday conversation about the condo and how to where they want to put another bedroom, but they're like breaking through traps, like crawling in different vents, like lifting up things, breaking down into water. So like the amount of detail and like the amount of love pressed into those pages is like undeniable, because like you feel with the story, but you're like it doesn't add up. The story is talking about one thing, which is just monotonous everyday like couple stuff, but you're watching them like battle through all of these minions to get to Big Boss. And you're like, what? Like, how is this? Like, your mind is kind of broken, much like what's his first name, Scott. That it ends up working. So like, I'm constantly like, this is one of the best page turners because you always want to see where it's going next. You always want to see what's going next, and like it never slows down for them. Like the only time it kind of stops is when they're sleeping.
Yeah. And he doesn't even like Scott Free isn't his real name. That's a name that Granny Goodness gave to him. So it's like he doesn't even. This is a man who doesn't even know his real name, and the only thing he's really got going for him is, well, he's got the escape artist thing, but he's his
Yeah,
wife,
Barda. I was
who's
gonna say.
she's a ride or die, but even her at the beginning, like there's that one early issue, I think one or first or second issue, they're gonna jump through the portal to Apocalypse, and she's or New Genesis, New Genesis, and she's like, he's like, something's wrong with me, like I need help. She's kind of like, just shelf it for now.
We gotta
Like,
go.
don't worry about it. We have a war to fight, so just suck it up, and then we'll deal with it later. And he's kind of like, oh, okay. It's like, damn, man. Like, even for somebody who so close to him, who loves him so much, he's kind of like, I don't have time for this right now. They come back to that later,
Right.
and she has very good reasoning to give the tough love thing going
Yeah,
on.
he kind of drops the
She's-
ball in that too.
Yeah, she rocks him, and he's kind of like, shoot. But at the same time, she didn't even like. From what we saw, she doesn't. She seems very dismissive of his his mental issues.
Right. Scott's kind of a punching bag in the majority of the story, as he's just reacting to things that are happening until
Mm.
he gets his purpose. And again, I think we're both going to recommend this book, so I don't want to say what the purpose turns into. But then you figure out like he's got a job now. He's got to go do the job so he can come back to like his house life. And then you can kind of see a flip of he's no longer a punching bag, like he's trying to punch back, but he's still trying to answer questions. Like one of my favorite issues, I think was 4, is when is it or Orion, who's his older brother? That's kind of his brother, his stepbrother.
Oh right, yeah. He becomes the High Father when their dad dies. Yeah.
He's doing the interrogation,
That's a really good issue.
and
yeah.
like it's a lot of similar paneling. Only the words change, but when it does change, like the amount of again emotion built into it, it's so tense. And Orion's trying to get this truth, and the audience already knows what the real truth is, but they're trying to break Scott, and then
Do you though?
well, we see in the previous issue, right?
We'll come back to that, but like, do you? Though? Anyways, go
But
ahead.
based on the questioning, you don't even know what's up from down. Like Scott kind of breaks the reader's mind of like, oh, because he's just saying true to a certain point, and then he snaps. Orion snaps.
That was great. That was great when he just yells.
He can't take it anymore, and it's like, wow, like
just hits him. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
I'm just saying, like I wasn't expecting as much heavy themes with this book. Like it really rocks you to your core, and then they put a heart in it, and even that heart rocks you a little more because then they all have something to lose, and you're like, no, like I was not like I just wanted this to be something like in and out, but man,
What kills me too is that this is a very, very dense and deep comic, but it's very funny too. Like there's a lot of funny interactions, even when they're trying to talk to Darkseid's forces to kind of garner a peace, like a
Mhm.
treaty. And like Light Ray's there, who's because Orion, yeah, there's spoilers. We're gonna talk spoilers in this because we kind of have to.
Except for one, I don't think we have to go with one.
Which one? Yeah, okay, we can. There's a way to avoid that. Yeah,
That's a good one too, because that kind of they built to it.
but I do want to talk about the
All
ending.
right, fair.
But yeah, that's
Fair.
What was I saying? Oh yeah, and so Orion gets knocked off the board, and then Scott ends up becoming the new High Father. So he's trying to talk peace or talk an agreement with the Apocalypse forces, and Light Ray's next to him like, you can't, like, they're at a table, they're literally at a table, and he's like, I'm gonna kill you, you knocked out Orion and stuff, and they're just like, Light Ray, chill, man. Like, we're just trying to talk here. We're just trying to, because this fighting is getting us nowhere.
And how dense each panel is. Above the scene, they're having that argument, but below the table, there's like 4 slaves that are chained, and they're propping up the table.
Yeah.
So like you never forget you're in Apocalypse, right? Like there's a great day and night, right? You know when you're in Earth because Earth is recognizable, but you know when you're in Apocalypse because everything's just off a little. They're wearing their masks, full colors, but like everybody is a little seedier and a little grimier, and like everybody's just either in a battle or about to start a war.
Did you notice too that the lines between the frames are white when they're on Earth and then black when they're in Apocalypse? Yeah. The whole mood changes when you're reading it. It's like,
my favorite stuff was when anytime they kind of like press through a wall or like go through an entrance and the color flips. Like I love the invert because it made you look at Mr. Miracle completely different, and tonally he changes too. Like, and I love like his setup. Like I love his look. and we've been stressing for as long as we've had this. Like DC is so deep with their secondary, third, tertiary. I don't know how to say four, fifth. Just their gallery is so dense with characters that have such deep stories. Like to get this guy and Barda.
Yeah, Barda's great too. She's great
and holds her
She's a
holds
great
holds
character.
her weight the entire time.
Yeah, she's great. She's the most stable one in the whole book. She's kind of like, and she loses her temper. Like she smokes Granny Goodness and stuff. Like she's tough, and like her relationship with the Furies is interesting too because she used to be a Fury. She used to lead
Right.
them, and then she bailed to be with Scott. But when they're not at war, they're all
friends,
friendly.
yeah.
But then when it's time for war, it's like I'm gonna kill you. By the way,
Which is cool. Like they understand
Yeah.
kind of the peace treaty, and on Earth it's a little different. So when they come to Earth, but I just love how people just open up kind of a boom tube and transform right into like their condo, and like the war would just keep like there's no days off, right? Like they were always so connected, and they couldn't leave this world, even though they're basically refugees, right? Like they're
Yeah.
both born of Apocalypse.
Apocalypse, and they both bailed. Yeah, and it's funny that you're saying because when you think about it, there's so many people that just show up
Yes.
in their condo, right? And Orion does multiple times. I mean, Oberyn was kind of there, but not. I don't think Light Ray shows up. Forager shows up. Funky, but Funky, who actually I looked into that. I was like, this is Stan Lee.
Yeah.
This is a Stan Lee
Stand-in, because
but
he's saying Excelsior. He's saying greetings. He says all of the catchphrases that Stan Lee says.
all the
which is
catchphrases.
great.
Now I looked into him, and he's actually a classic character that Jack Kirby created after they're falling out. So he's kind of making fun of Stan Lee, but it's not
It's like tongue in cheek.
It's not technically based on just on Stan Lee. It's actually an amalgamation of people that he knew that he was kind of making fun of. But yeah, it's I was like, this guy is Stan Lee, like through and through.
Easily.
But,
And he's Scott Free's manager, I guess, or agent. Like he's always trying to.
yeah, well, he served Orion first, and then jumped ship and became, an assistant for him and Brig Barda. And he ends up being like a real one in the end because he just does what he's told. But every time he talks, and there's also it's interesting how they throw it back to like an old 70s comic with the exposure. It's like, here we go, and then Scott Free is now he's on the loose, and it's like a exclamation mark.
Right.
It's very. It just adds a little bit more crazy to the comic.
The golden age touch, right? Like that he's making a nod to an older way of doing comics.
It just adds a whole new layer to, like, what will Mr. Miracle do next? How will he escape from this? And like that's his biggest thing. That's what the book is about. His biggest why he tried to commit suicide is apparently he tried to escape what's something you can't escape from, death. So he tried to escape death, but in the end, we're not sure if
he did
that
he
happens
did or didn't.
or not. Yeah.
Like that's its own mindfuck. This book asks a lot of questions that you could be studying in psychology class, sociology class, criminology class. Like they run the gambit. I was gonna say this is the book that should have easily been a whoosh, but they found a way to keep the thread tight, strong, and then have both characters walk it evenly. So you're never like at some point Scott's kind of the antagonist.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not a bad thing. Like he's just stumbling through it, but he has Barda there to be the protagonist until he's ready to be the protagonist. And then like you have Darkseid actually shows up, which is
Darkseid's fun.
That issue's amazing because it shouldn't make sense.
No.
And yet there's a nice callback in that with how everything unfolds.
Yeah, and it doesn't make sense, but I don't know. It all depends because I when I finished reading this, I was like, that's it. But then you kind of, I don't know, you think on it and you sit with it and you start looking things up and you're like, wait a second, what? You try, and then it's one of those books that where you read and you want more opinions on it. That's why I couldn't wait to talk to you about it. I was like, I want to know how you feel about this because this is a special book. It's very unique. It's one of my favorite reads I think we've ever done.
High praise.
I don't know if it's just for the how dense it is. Like there's so much we could sit here and talk about this book for 2 hours.
This was supposed to be an episode.
Yeah, well, no, it was not supposed to be. It was supposed to be okay. We're not changing things around. But it could have easily been an episode. I was like, do we make this 2 parts? Like, you can read the first 6 and then we'll do that 1 part. But then we have to do full spoilers, and we're trying to spoil everything.
Yeah.
But it's almost one of those books that's, you could have it spoiled for you
And still read it.
still
yeah.
go into it and still enjoy it, because it's just the way it's told and the way it reads, the way it's drawn, the layout is like, I don't know.
It sucks you in very fast. I'm still trying to play catch up with it, and then like the real questions are like, I don't know if he really got the happy ending.
Exactly. See, do you want to start talking about the ending? Is there anything else you want to talk about? Because the ending,
I'd give more love to Bertha. I mean, sorry,
Barda.
I would give more love to Barda, but I was gonna say I was gonna give more love to Granny Goodness, because when she popped up, I was like, oh my gosh! And then she has like a sit down with them, and that sit down dinner is so fun because you get to see the dynamics of how she treated both of them. But there's so much fun stuff happening in that issue. Like they sneak around and go kill a whole bunch of other people, but it ends on a weird cliffhanger. Like this is easily a comic that I'd love to see produced by the same people that did Legion on FX.
Oh yeah, that's a good call.
Because they understand not everything. It's kind of a mind fuck. Like not everything's really happening. You can pull back the heavy handedness. Like there's an absurdity of how Mr. Miracle looks and the fact that he's an escape artist, and they always include that in there. Like every 3 or 4 issues, he's like, all right, I'm going to do another escape act, right? Like he'll jump in a barrel and get hit by a train. And in all likeliness, he should be treated as a joke, right? Like he's a dude in kind of looks like Red Tornado, kind of looks like Vision.
Yeah, like across the two.
Got the high collars and everything, and like posters on the wall. But you cross him over into Apocalypse, and he's a main player. Like he understands, and just because of his birthright and the birthright taken from him, his storyline, his arc, and like you said earlier, like he's constantly suffering with like like he's getting dreams early on in the comics, and those don't make sense until it makes sense. So like I'm constantly like, like do I treat this guy serious? And like he's playing with like a Booster Gold doll at some point.
Yeah, then he meets a Booster Gold and Blue Beetle, and they're just like hanging out, and then that's it. It's done. And then like his friend who's dead, he sees him. It's always when he's alone.
Yes,
you know that?
Yes. So this reminded me of Legion, the TV show, in the best possible way, because it really felt like a study on somebody's brain. I feel like we get to see Barda the way that he wants to see her. I don't know if we always get to see her as who she is. And in a lot of scenarios, he gets to save the day, but I don't know if he's actually saving the day. So there's all those questions that I'm like, wait a minute, hold on a second. And then he has to, like, he does his dumb job and like goes and escapes. Like, what was the one where he climbed like a water tower or something like that and like jumped off that?
Yeah.
It's weird where they throw in the comedy notes, because you're not expecting to laugh there and you do. And then like you get hit with like something that's a little more heavy and you're like,
You notice how he wears like every JL member's shirt at some point. That was a really cool touch. Flash, you got Aquaman,
there's Green Lantern, yes. And I don't understand. I mean, superheroes exist in this world, right?
Yeah. Like, this is in continuity with that. That brings us to the ending, which is, if you want to get to the ending, we can talk about that. And basically what it comes down to, because the last issues, the comic's not subtle at all. This is not a subtle comic. This is like always in your face. It's kind of telling you what's going on. You're kind of piecing things together, and Scott's a little bit nuts, and you kind of what he's seeing. Like when they meet Granny Goodness, remember the first time in the camp, she's talking all this smack about his brother. It's like, what is this real, or is this like not real? Like what is going on? So in the ending, you kind of have to make a decision. When it all comes to head, and the last issue, you hear from a bunch of people that have died or come and gone within the comic, and I think it's Granny Goodness is saying that he's in hell, right? She's the one that says he's in hell. Then he sees his brother, and his brother says he's in heaven.
Yeah. You're like,
It could be that. It could be some sort of limbo. It could be because, do you remember what his brother interrogated him for in the moment? And that was, do you possess the anti-life equation? Like, is that in you? What
that's what broke him.
Darkseid is after. That's what broke him. Question that broke him. So is that what it is then? Is he in the anti-life equation? Like, is he somewhere where he's this fourth, because they talk about the fourth dimension, the fourth world, and it's all about what's in your mind. And if you think about the ending when Metron shows up,
Mm-hmm.
because Metron shows up twice in this book, and at the end he shows up and he has that splash page, all the heroes. It's like, you've solved it.
Yeah,
You can come back
you
to
earned your
the
spots,
real world. You can and join us,
because
or you can stay.
Bart is in that lineup. He's not in that lineup.
Yes,
Bart is in there.
he's not in the lineup. No, he's the only one
Yeah.
missing. Everybody's there. Everybody from the jail and then further and even more so. And he chooses to stay. So it's like, it's almost like picking your fantasy over real life. That's kind of how I took it. It's like, you're living in a fantasy world. Everything you want is here. Yeah, there's some weird stuff going on too, because you can't control everything. But it's your fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
You're married to the woman you love. You have this nice condo, right? You're now the king. You're the High Father. You're basically God. High Father is God, right? You're in a war, yes, but you're in a position of power. And now at the ending, something's gone down that you've wanted to do this whole time, and you've technically won out, I guess. Or you can go back to the real world. And he's like, nah, I'll stay here.
Yeah, because that would explain kind of, I don't want to say time jumps, but things escalate faster than they would in normal time. Now that can be a process of who they are and where they're from. Like, who's to say that wouldn't happen organically, because these guys are aliens essentially from Apocalypse. But it's a little jarring because they were talking about the condo, and then they're like, oh, we gotta go to the hospital.
Yeah.
And all of that starts to play out. And they go back again.
And they're fighting through Apocalypse, talking about renovations. Sorry to cut you off, but you just reminded me of that. I forgot about that. That scene goes on forever.
Yes. For the punchline, and it's a great punchline. And like, he's the most elated in that situation. Like, Bart is a little worried, but he's like, oh, like, I love you the most now.
Yeah.
And that would kind of be, and he gets to be the savior in that, right? Like, that's what I was talking about. Like, when he starts doing his day job, which is, I got to go to Apocalypse and like be the king. And there's like great sniper shot where Light's looking over his shoulder and he kills that Hitler looking dude.
Yeah, that
was weird, but he's like, bang. And the shot was like, sweet. Like, he's here and he leaves it. And I do love how they just keep interjecting his Earth world with his Apocalypse world, because Bardo would still be talking to her through the mother box.
Yeah.
And it would just be like the mundane things.
Great.
It worked. None of this should work at all. But
they're talking about the most ridiculous things when he's like slitting people's throats and stuff. It's like, oh, you're supposed to be having a duel with this guy, and if you win, he's withdrawing his army. But she's like, oh, I'm at the doctor though, and it's like, come on. He's like, okay, I'll fight him, and then he loses.
She's like, maybe next time. He's like, yeah, like he's being carried away on like a stretcher and stuff too, right? He's just bloodied up,
like bleeding.
And this is a fairly graphic novel too. Like, they don't pull punches. Yeah. Legit, like when he beats up Orion during the interrogation, like he removes his helmet and you see him just bloodying. And I love that he keeps going back to, like, there's always get a vegetable platter. Like, he keeps getting.
Can I get a carrot?
Veggie tray. And he keeps going back to that, right?
Great.
So I feel
I learned that veggie trays are vital.
They are. It's that or hot dogs. You gotta get hot dogs again. I feel like the only reason this works, everything is so chaotic, because the structure is the same. Like, you keep the nine panel keeps you anchored down to in anybody else's hands. You'd be like, where are we going? What's happening next? But there's a constant, like, after this panel, there's panel 2. After panel 2, there's panel 3. Then I go down 4, 5, 6, down 7, 8, 9, and it keeps you locked in, regardless of what's happening in that world. But so much is happening in that world. And then, again, this is our discussion for the end of the comic. We don't even know if this is the world or his world, which is in his mind.
Yeah. Or is it heaven? Is it hell? We don't is it limbo? Is it the afterlife? Is it the anti-life equation? Like, nobody knows what's going on. So that's what makes it so. I think he's stuck in the anti-life equation. I think his brother was right. Yep. I'm not necessarily sure, but that if he's like an agent of Darkseid, but he's in it, I think, and that's dark on its own. Like, that's twisted in its own. He's got no hope. He's just lost in his mind, and he's happy.
Yeah,
there.
but
that's crazy.
But he created the best possible place for him in his world. Like, he is, he gets to be a provider and kind of the match to the love of his life, and they have their ups and downs, but he didn't make it completely perfect. Like we were saying earlier,
No.
like this is what WandaVision wanted to be. Like to
Yeah.
ask all these
Oh,
questions
that's good.
and then have these kind of paradoxical, I don't know if it's up or down, that leaves the audience like, huh, like we have to keep talking about this. And they're really close to that too, right? Like I feel like they're just knocking on the door of like, I feel like they pulled the rug from us faster in WandaVision. It's just like, okay, everything's kind of in her head and stuff. When you could have kept needling us and disrupting slowly, yeah.
Poking. Yeah.
But at the center of it is like a love story. Like I love this girl. This girl loves me. We understand two worlds completely different than everybody else. As long as we're together, we can handle it. Or can we? Like, is he now just creating this relationship to be as perfect as he thinks it is? Um, this is definitely like a reread,
Exactly.
and I don't think we've nominated that before. But you would have to reread it again to be like, huh, because I love the parallels that they do. Like we talk about every time they go through the boom tube, it's always the same sort of setup, right? Like you see the bright light in the background,
Mhm.
and then you
Yeah.
see them facing that light in the foreground, and they'll have a little conversation, and the wind blows, and their capes go separate. But sometimes the cape doesn't go fully. Sometimes he doesn't
Yeah.
choose to go through. Like there's always little hiccups, little glitches, little stitches, little deja vu's, a little bit of Matrix too. Like there's a lot of influences in here that a movie fan would be like, I like this, I like this, I like this, or a comic fan would be like, huh, wow. But an easy recommend.
Yeah, easy, and you're also right. I just want to throw that out one
Yes.
more time to the paneling you were talking about. On it, that's why it works. You're
Mhm.
absolutely right because that has
Yep.
structure, and the story does not. But the paneling keeps it organized, the chaos organized in some weird, twisted way that just works, and you're like, I'm all in with this. This is dope. So we rate these on a good or bad basis. Boom for good, bah for bad, or whoosh for what the hell did we just read? Like you were
This
saying
should have been like
earlier,
a
this
double
could have
whoosh.
easily been
Double whoosh, like
easily
super.
been a
What
whoosh.
happened? Like
Yeah,
Darcy, like could have gone off.
but the more time that I spend after reading this, the more I like it. The more I think about it, I'm like, that was genius. Like
Yeah.
that was art. Like that was, I don't know. Like
Okay.
it gives me like a Prince of Cats type vibe where it's like, man, the more I think about this, the more I love this. And I read Prince of Cats. I went back and read Prince of Cats again.
It's great.
And I didn't like it the first time.
Verily, it's verily. Come on,
I love it. And now I love it. It's my verily one of my favorite of all time. Now this one's like, man, this is gonna creep up into my top 5. Like if I'm not careful, like I'm gonna read it again.
We're undercutting how visually beautiful this book is. Like we're not going into deal like
Yeah.
it's
Colors,
pastel,
yeah.
like drawn and everything like that, but their color palette and the way that they flip it, it's always like a light switch. When you're in Earth, it's lights on. When you're in Apocalypse, it's lights off, and then they bleed together. But the artist understands soft, darks, lights, hards, and anytime it's like a hologram or like you're not sure if you're really seeing it, like that character always like feels like they don't belong in that panel, and it looks beautiful. Like especially towards the end when like Darkseid comes back and you can't see, like he's singing the lullaby, like Darkseid's just sitting on the couch, but he doesn't fit there. Like it hurts your brain because like he doesn't belong
It's
there.
ridiculous.
Like,
Yeah,
why
it's
is he there? But like it's the most comforting
Yeah.
like 9 panels except for like one where it's like Darkseid's just like like looming over. It's gorgeous book. I can't speak enough about how beautiful it looks. In the wrong hands, this would have just been a cluster of like,
Yeah,
huh?
but
What?
I
Who?
don't know, man.
This
This
person?
one,
Why'd you bring
I
this
think it's
person?
wonderful, and this is an easy book to get frustrated with and just bail early. No, I'm serious. Like that's fair because there's a lot going on, and it kind of expects you to know some things. And there's if you understand the history of these characters, it makes it even better.
It helps,
I'm,
but then
I don't think
they
either
they
one of
did
us really do all that well, but it's like I
no.
knew the basics, so it's like okay,
That's what I appreciate about the book because once you get to like 5th and 6th, then you understand the Barda Scott relationship, and
Mhm.
they talk about how their history has bled over. So those first 3 issues make more sense because they're talking about we know what that was. We're here now. We're trying to be here now. My question to you, this is on the spot question, is how would you like to see this continue? Would you like to see another 12 issues of this? Would you like to see a TV series, or do you think that they could make this into a cohesive, amazing movie, or a fourth
Yeah,
option?
yeah. I don't want to see this continue. I think it's a nice 12. It wraps up perfectly where it is. In terms of adaptations, like my first instinct is to say movie. That's because the budget I know will be bigger and they would do
Mhm.
more weird things. And you give it to somebody I don't know who, who'd be that would make sense, but he's gone. But Stanley Kubrick would be like a crazy movie.
It'd be amazing,
But it's
because he
like,
would understand the mind, and you'd be looking
yeah,
at like the
something like that.
carpet and stuff, and like that. Like, the poster in the back would have its own,
Yeah,
and that poster always
That's what
the
I-
poster always throws me off. And then Barter punches it in a couple pen. I was like, yes, like
yeah.
there's a lot going back. This is probably a book we could do a deep dive and go character by character and be like, who's this person? We didn't even talk about the Batman nods in here because we get
We're trying to stay away from a couple things. Yeah, we're trying to stay away from a couple things, but that's yeah.
It's
So
funny. Yeah,
boom, easy boom for me too.
boom.
One thing that is interesting to know is that Tom King and Mitch Gerard have done several books together, so
Could
we're
it
going to see
be?
them again.
Could that
So-
be another dynamic duo?
It could be another. We could do another six pack. I'm gonna look into that because I know they got the Vision. I know they have Vision, and I know they have, or he has Vision. No,
Really?
that wasn't with Gerard. That was somebody else. That was somebody else.
That'd
I'm
be
sorry.
super interesting. Again, like, and that's who. Because I'm not familiar with Mr. Miracle, but as soon as I was like Vision, like that's my first go to.
He did Vision
His
more than a
look.
man. I think it was a couple years before. This is 2017. I think he did Vision in 2015. I remember reading I think I read the first issue. And I was kind of like, I don't get this, but because it's very much like this. So I'd love to go back.
Go
and
back
read
to that world,
yeah.
Especially all we know about Vision now, right?
Yes, but
White Vision's still out there, eh?
yes,
He is though. Like,
yes, he is.
White Vision, he's having his white boy summer. Like, that dude's been gone. That dude's been gone.
He's the Chet
He's like,
Hanks of the Marvel universe.
He's like, yo, I got no kids, no wife. All right, I'm gone.
Peace.
Bro. He's in Trinidad
With Nikki right now for Carnival.
He's at Carnival for real.
I thought I saw a white boy
Man.
on the back of those Nikki,
Listen,
Nikki videos.
He's got all the powder and colors
The
all
towel.
dripped and draped. Yes, he's going. Completely off topic. Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Stop it there.
Doesn't matter. This is an arc analysis.
See now your video.
This is an
there
arc
you go.
analysis.
No, hey, choppy.
This is a.
This is.
I don't know what's staying in, but this is an arc analysis. So we're doing another arc analysis. We're back.
Is
You
arc
fuck.
analysis.
Hey, Dake.
How you doing?
Hey,
No, let's
Coke.
get real here. Let's get real here. How you doing? I miss you.
You know,
We usually talk all day. I haven't talked to you in days.
this is an arc analysis.